Welcome back, ladies, fellasmen, and every variation thereupon. We've got another installment of Indie Insight that's going to cover the first volume of Relentlessly Bullied Hero, written by Ken Vergil and illustrated by Jose Dibu. RBH was brought to my attention shortly after Red Rapture, which is why these videos are going up so close together, and totally not because I'm an expert level procrastinator that let weeks pass me by while I was losing control of my life. This also comes at a time where Relentlessly Bullied Hero has a Kickstarter going to help get Volume 3 off the ground. A link to that will be in the description below if you find yourself interested after the review. Don't forget that if you're a creator yourself and you'd like me to review your project, feel free to shoot me an email to the address on screen and I will get back to you. As always, a huge shout out to these wonderful people for their continued support over on Patreon, with a special shout out to Celestial tier members Brendan Carlson, Chohen Sheen, Stephen PD101, This One Snack, Totally Reasonable Curb, and Trey Hardy. If you'd like to see videos early, support the channel, and potentially get some future goodies, you can follow the link in the description below. If that's not your speed, a comment, like, and subscribe go a long way too, and doing all of this costs you nothing. Now with all of that out of the way, let's dive into Volume 1 of Relentlessly Bullied Hero, starting with a quick synopsis. Relentlessly Bullied Hero follows the adventures of Zeal, a newbie in the hero world that has genuine care for the work he does and the state of hero culture. The story begins with him heeding the call to face off against the select antagonist for this outing, a man who has a love of explosives that can create plenty of varying sizes and force. What do you think his name is? It's Burst Zerker. Burst Zerker. I love it. It isn't long before we're introduced to Grimoira, the co-main character, or at the very least, lead supporting character. The two have a hilariously dysfunctional relationship that he can't shake thanks to a pact he made with her at some point in the past. When Zeal faces off against Burst Zerker, he unfortunately bites off a bit more than he can chew and is promptly dog-walked by this newbie villain. In the aftermath of his defeat, we follow Zeal as he slowly reveals what acts and ideals he views as heroic, while he has to not only deal with Grimoira being a pain in his ass, but also prepare for his inevitable showdown with Berserker before more people get hurt. If that sounds like an interesting setup for you and you're a fan of superhero stories, you should follow the link in the description below to check out Relentlessly Bullied Hero for yourself. In the meantime, let's take a look at the art. Like I mentioned before, the art is handled by Jose Dibu, and it's clear that they have a firm grasp of this particular type of media. Right out the gate, even though it does read left to right for the ease of consumption of Western audiences, this is the project that has felt the closest to nailing down the vibe of what you typically find within the pages of Jump magazine. It's very traditional in its artistic choices, panel structure, and composition while still having a personality of its own. In that same vein, the adherence to what people recognize as manga pays back dividends in terms of the overall flow of a page. This aspect is usually on point, with a single exception that I'll mention momentarily. Jose is also very clearly having fun with the characters when it comes to facial expressions and just how exaggerated they can get, and it's the consistency of the art itself that allows the artist to be able to play with those expressions to supplement the needs of the tone. Each of the primary characters we spend Volume 1 focusing on, and even a side character, have distinct visual identities so that even when things are hectic, it's easy to differentiate between them at a glance. And while the character designs we've seen thus far aren't anything groundbreaking, they are certainly still good. The action is drawn with an obvious understanding of what's expected of typical shonen, specifically knowing when and what to highlight without doing too much too often. Jose is also skilled at selling the tone of specific panels, whether that's the humor, a sense of unease or horror, a moment of perseverance, or even just a sense of earnestness. The choices in background art are also executed just enough to get the point across when necessary without doubling the workload. There are a couple of minor issues though. Nothing that ruins the experience, just some stuff I personally took note of. First, it can very occasionally be a little difficult to follow the flow of the action, but it's honestly rare enough that it isn't a huge deal. There were just some moments that felt a little off, like when an animation is clearly missing a few frames in the middle of an otherwise smooth run. There are also times when the absence of a background in favor of a gradient makes the art seem kind of flat or floaty. Like these panels, Grim is pinning Zeal to the ground, but without the additional background, it just feels a bit off. This isn't true for every panel without backgrounds, just a handful where the extra visual context would be nice. Lastly, on the flip side of what I said about the page flow, there are pages every once in a while that feel as though there's a bit too much going on in terms of the number of panels and the amount of speech bubbles. It causes the pages to feel cramped and does upset the otherwise solid flow of the composition. But honestly, those are my only real issues, and even those can be considered nitpicks depending on who you are and what you want out of a manga. Like I said before, it isn't groundbreaking art by any means, but it is still very much accomplishing what it set out to do while being on par with plenty of stuff I've seen exist in popular spaces. So keep up the good work, Jose, and let's hop on over to the writing. As we all know, the writing of even an aesthetically pleasing project can make or break it, so I'm happy to report that RBH has exactly the kind of writing it needs, and Volume 1 does a great job of setting the stage, even though we don't necessarily see the greater story in motion just yet. It comes out of the gate swinging, with an antagonist that our protagonist can clash with, giving the reader an understanding of not only what kind of hero Zeal is, but what kind of person he is. It's kind of a self-contained incident that allows us a proper introduction to this world while following Zeal through his participation in this world. This allows the story to be told organically with minimal use of exposition except where necessary, but aside from the natural plot hooks that arise, I didn't walk away from this experience feeling like there were important things that went undefined. Following Zeal during his hero work allowed for natural characterization. This also extends to the dialogue, which at first felt kind of stiff between Berserker clearly being a dramatic theater kid and Zeal being an overly serious self-righteous edgelord. But then you realize that that's the joke, and once the pieces settle into place, it works wonderfully. Not to mention, despite being a self-righteous edgy dweeb, Zeal is just someone that needs to learn to relax a bit, and we see there's more to him underneath that. For example, we can see that Zeal has a great respect for the very concept of heroism and the many forms it can take. When he returns to the site of Berserker's initial attack to clean up a bit, Grimm tells him the city can just hire workers to do the cleaning, but Zeal knows that by contributing to the cleanup efforts himself, he can save taxpayers a few bucks, which in its own way is also a heroic act in his eyes. Zeal's many interactions with Grimm over the course of Volume 1 and their banter is probably one of my favorite aspects and allows us the periodic peek behind the curtain. Though she's a villain, they have an oddly wholesome dynamic that I genuinely look forward to seeing more of. Shifting gears just slightly, the magic system, although not clearly defined yet, does appear to have a similar structure to it as something like My Hero Academia. The concept of superheroes and villains with superpowers is incredibly easy for an audience to digest, and there hasn't been any additional terminology that requires extra context. This could change as the world expands, but for now it's easily consumable. Also, I wasn't expecting it by any means, but Relentlessly Bullied Hero is actually an incredibly funny project at times. There were honestly several instances where I genuinely laughed out loud because a stray punchline caught me by surprise. Like this exchange. Zeal is asking why Burst is targeting a place that a French diplomat enjoys, and Burst, with his entire chest, just says, "'Cause fuck the French, that's why." The humor could have easily gone overboard, but it balances out just right when measured against Zeal's very serious demeanor. So with the myriad of good things, there are also a couple of things I noticed, only one of which is probably a real issue, and that's the fact that the sentence structure could do with some fine-tuning every now and then. Once in a while there are sentences that don't flow well or feel like they were written with predictive text. It's not enough to ruin the experience, but it did happen often enough to have stood out. The only other thing I can really think to point out as a nitpick is the absence of world building to give slightly more context to the state of play in the world. Like I said, it's a very self-contained and well-executed introduction, but the extent of our world building thus far has been heroes and villains exist. But again, based on the execution, it is difficult to even dock points for that. To be honest, the writing didn't really leave much room for criticism. It's not the kind of script that will blow your mind and have you frothing at the mouth to find out what happens next, but it is an entertaining prologue to whatever is supposed to come next. There's enough meat on the bones of this one that you're not left hungry. And that concludes our time with Volume 1 of Relentlessly Bullied Hero. Overall, this is a very enjoyable time with interesting character work, lots of humor, pop culture references, and enough plot hooks to genuinely make you curious about what's coming next. The art is consistent with some flair to it while still trying to find ways to set itself apart from the competition. While it's not perfect, I do think it's plenty capable of scratching that superhero manga itch that fans of that genre may have right now. With all of that in mind, my final rating for Volume 1 of Relentlessly Bullied Hero is that it's got me stargazing. I'll be keeping a close eye on the progress of this one, and I hope you guys do too. If this project looks interesting to you, you can follow the links in the description to check out Volumes 1 and 2, or you can head over to the Kickstarter to support that way. Regardless of my ratings on any of these projects, I do always encourage you to check these projects out yourself. You may not agree with what I have to say, and it's always nice to support the actual creators themselves. If there are any other creators out there that want a review of your indie project, feel free to shoot an email to the address on screen and I will get to you accordingly. Now going forward, when I get a chance to sit down with the creator like I did this time around, I want to make sure that they have the last word in every video. I think it's important to send the audience away from the experience with words from the creator themselves so they can see how much passion that person poured into their project. And in their own way, it's kind of a sales pitch. So with that in mind, please enjoy this edited down version of the interview I had with the creator of Relentlessly Bullied Hero. Remember to take care of yourselves and others. I'll see you soon, and as always, thanks for watching. So for the people at home, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, what's up everyone? Heel Dark here, the hero you don't deserve but need. And yeah, I'm just a manga creator of the, well, I guess say American manga, some people call it comics. If I'm being honest, I kind of just don't care for the whole conversation. But, yeah, I'm the maker of Relentlessly Bullied Hero. It's a superhero shonen
Where did your journey as a creator start?
I'd say that kind of has like 3 or 4 different points, kind of depending on how you define it. But I guess you can say I was always, at least as a kid, I was always one of those people where, when you watch stuff, like I grew up watching shows like Justice League Unlimited, Stats Suck, Dragon Ball, Naruto and such. So I was one of those kids where, because to get so into it, you start creating your own little adventure in your heads and such. So, from there, of course, you're a child, so you didn't really get the concept of you can actually just make stories and such. So for the most part, there's the main things that are in my head, zoning out in class a lot and that kind of such. I think like once I had like a little notebook where I wrote or tried, at least attempted to draw some things down. But then, from then, it was kind of just remaining that limbo of in my head and whatever was in that scrapbook. I think I lost at this point because, I don't know, something happened to it. Anyways, but I kind of remained in that limbo until, I think it was around high school where we had an assignment where the teacher asked us to basically write a story. I forgot what class it was for. It was a decent class, and so kind of out of fun of it, I made it like a horror film, not film, but a horror story. And of course, surprisingly, everyone in class liked it, like really liked it. Well, I was like one of the last person who presented his, so like midway through it, that's when class ended. But everyone in class was like so into seeing how it ends that they were just like, can we finish reading it the next class? That kind of such. I got that's kind of set me on my path. I was just like, oh wow, this is actually kind of fun to do. And then, kind of clicked to me, I could actually start putting these stories in my head on a piece of paper. And then from there, I was just researching, doing little fix here and there, just, that slow climb from being a other complete, I guess you could say, novice or tourist or whatever, into actually going, oh, okay, so this is how you structure the story, this is how you do this. And then, just slowly going to, okay, if you actually want to, by the time I started getting onto what I created, Relentlessly Bullied Hero, it was kind of just like, okay, well, of course, I'm actually trying to do something with some form of professionalism to it. So it's like, okay, well, you gotta do a little bit more research than your usual stuff. So you gotta get a better hint of how to do characters, how to structure stories, know your limit, and all that kind of such.
Zeal is noticeably different from a lot of protagonists in the sense that he's incredibly self-righteous, but not in a performative way. What was the thought process behind that specific decision, aside from like it being a direct critique of the cynicism that is part of the superhero genre right now?
Well, some of it kind of involves spoilers for like stuff that not even I've gotten into writing with, but other parts kind of just like both kind of like the comedy of it, since it'll kind of be funny because I don't want to just make a book where I'm just ranting and saying messages and such, because then I feel like the jackass. But it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, so I just kind of thought, maybe I can make the story like the main character is a little bit of a dickhead, but in the way where it's like, okay, yeah, he's a little bit annoying, but everyone can easily tell his heart is truly in the right place. And so I kind of decided to play with it. So it's like, okay, I can get a little bit of both where you can have some serious, serious discussion about what it is to be a hero, while also kind of, I guess to say, giving a little wink, nudge to the audience that, okay, no, you don't have to take everything so serious. I'm not trying to be like a nihilist, or I'm smarter than anyone, or my story's the best, or I'm the true hero stuff here. It was like, oh no, Zia is a flawed person just like everyone else.
RBH is much funnier than I expected it to be, based on even just small throwaway lines without going overboard. Was it always the plan to lean into the humor more than stories of this style usually do?
Yeah, of course. I'm someone where I do enjoy having a laugh and such. I'm, despite everything, I am like a decently joyful person. Well, I want things to be good, happy. I'm not just a nihilist who thinks everything sucks and such. It was like, okay, yeah, I will have my critique of things. Generally speaking, I want them to be at the end of someone enjoying something than it is to just, being angry about it. That's why even for shows or series I don't like and such, I won't just spend all my time trashing them or just finding a reason to complain. If I have a complaint about something, I will say it if I feel like it, but it's not like, okay, I'll go hunting for it. And so that's why the series is partly comedy, so that both, as I mentioned before, because Zeal's an edgelord, I made a little bit more comedy, so it's like, okay, I don't turn people off or get them in a mindset that, oh, okay, this is a super serious, no jokes, no hold bars, series of depth and such. But it's like, okay, yeah, those things do exist, but like, not everything is that serious, and that's kind of even things that it's kind of centered that even Zeal had to learn. Was like, okay, yeah, bad things do happen. There are issues, such, but that doesn't mean that you can't have no joy in it.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge with this particular project?
Honestly, when it comes to the project itself, I guess you could say it'll be two. One is, of course, publicity. The killer of many indies is that, okay, I gotta actually find people to, look at it, read it, and actually want to be invested in the story and such. So it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, how can I do this? Because let's be honest, a lot of people do things just to follow the trend or, just be a part of the discussion. And so that's a lot harder when your stuff is indie and, technically speaking, your view on is at zero, because then it's like a bunch of pomegranates. Number one, you're just starting out, so how much content can you actually get out there for people to be interested in? And then number two, you gotta get people to just go like, oh, okay, yeah, that's something I want to read. Because let's be honest, if some random guy comes up to you and just be like, oh, read my manga, I'm not saying no one would take it, but a lot more people would be like,
As I'm going to do with all of these, I would like to let you have the last word to the audience. So let the people know where they can find you, what you've got going on, and anything else you'd like to say.
So, Hero Dog, thankfully that's my more universal name. So, you can basically just type in and you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or X, however you want to say it. And you can probably find me. Usually on those stuff, it's just me showing up progress on my stuff I'm working on, whether it's manga or if I ever get to it, videos and such. And as for final words, I guess I can just say, well, one, follow the Kickstarter. Well, not follow the Kickstarter, no, it's already live, but at least check out the Kickstarter for the third chapter. It's coming out, well, yeah, it's live right now. So yeah, just check out this Kickstarter. And as for everything else, if anyone else there, whether if you're a guy who wants to do your own manga and stuff out there, give it a shot. You don't have to bet everything on it, but the issue that many creators out there suffer is they're too afraid to take the first step, whether they don't know where to take it, they overthink it, or as mentioned before, they get too worried to perfection that they can't do it. Just do a little research. It won't come to you all in a day. Yeah, that's all I gotta say.